All right, feedback on feedback session number 2. As we did last time, I'm going to probably skip through most of the comments and just go through some of the responses instead. The comments have been awesome. They've worked really well. They're just really quick things that I can usually do something about, so you've probably seen a lot of those get resolved. I am starting with Chapter 1, Launch, Section 1, Who and Why. That's where we left off last time. And I'm not going to try to abbreviate your names because then I have to edit those out anyways when I make a mistake like I did last time. So I'm going to keep it simple. I'm just going to go ahead and read them and not actually say who's saying what. So I get a comment, very nice conversational tone that is engaging to the reader and feels like a fun discussion from someone who has been through some stuff and has wisdom and experience to share. Cool. A few editorial clarifications. Try to stay away from things that ruin conversational tone. I am assuming that you intended this chapter to be introductory and not to go into too many details yet. To some degree, as I mentioned in one of my comments, I do wonder how much of the book will focus on things specific to coding and developing code as opposed to other kinds of creative projects. And I'm going to divide this video into 2 parts. I said last time that I would share my thoughts and only focus on yours. The second part of this video is going to be my thoughts. I still want to go ahead, since there's been so much more feedback, let me give you feedback on that first. But I'll get to my thoughts in this video in the second part. But just to respond to this, yes, I am struggling still a little bit with that concept, how much is specific to coding and how much is just creative projects in general. I am leaning on the side of creative projects in general. So I'm trying to find that fine line of where it's appropriate to spill how much information on the coding aspects. We'll get to more of that in a bit. Then it continues, it says, for me, definitely interested in reading more to find out what specifics are of what you have to share. Cool. And one of the comments says, does Agile software development, where it is important to determine the main purposes of the software up front before doing more detailed time, energy, money consuming work, play into this? And that's, I think, no, because, yeah, it's a useful metaphor, but it gets too specific in the coding. And that's starting to lead me further and further into the idea that I need to be very clear and careful how much coding we're actually going to get into, because at the very beginning of the launch, I think I even said something to the effect of, I'm only going to teach you how to teach yourself to code and why that's important, as opposed to teach you to code, which becomes obsolete anyways the moment you learn something and think it's going to stick around. Emotions and gender. So I list those two, emotions/gender, under some of the central topics or central themes. And the comment that I get is, this makes me wonder why you associate emotions and gender. I assume that will be discussed later in the book. Could be something that will intrigue some readers' sense of curiosity. Yeah, that will become more obvious later in the book. And it's been a huge, huge stumbling block to me growing up, because gender emotions was supposed to be something that you didn't share, or you either didn't have or you didn't share too much of if you were a man. I'll leave it at that. But the book definitely dives into a lot more, and there's tons of stories around that. Okay, now we're on target audiences. And the question that I asked was whether I was hitting each of those 4 correctly and whether high school was pigeonholing too much. And I get this comment, it says, yeah, I wondered about the words high school as well. I'm trying to think about some alternatives, what some alternatives could be. And you list a couple of really good ones here, and I'm not going to rattle them all off, but they did give me a lot of thought as to how to really target this more towards creativity, and really want to use code as just another tool. And the difficulty is, it's not just another tool. It is a really helpful tool to unlocking your creativity. And there's a lot of reasons to why that is. So yeah, I need to do some work on the subtitle and the target audience that are tied together in that. Now we're on Launch, Section 2, Formats and Overview. I like the conversational tone you use and what you do to warn the reader up front about possible language that some might not like. Yeah. I also like the way you explain the multimedia option. I think when you have more specifics, that could perhaps be emphasized a bit more. Definitely, and a lot of work's been put into that, so this will be a revision pretty soon. Perhaps that option will give you more, some things I probably shouldn't divulge just yet, but yep, I agree with what you're saying there, and maybe there could be a note on the cover of the book somewhere that says also available in a multimedia format. That's right. Oh yeah, I like that idea. I love this next comment. I also definitely think you come across as someone who is courageous enough to share many details about his life in order to help others create a better one for themselves, including foibles and pitfalls and a lot of personal information that many folks would not share about themselves. Assuming the information is relevant to the topics being discussed, I think many readers will feel a strong connection with you and your work because of that. I sure hope so, and thank you. And now, not that you didn't before, but can you more appreciate the epigraph where my dad is telling me about TMI? Yeah, that's the reason that was there. It was supposed to be a contradiction to this thing I'm trying to do. Not that I disagree with my dad. I 100% agree with my dad. At the same time, I 100% agree with myself. And that contradiction in terms provides a lot of friction to create some really cool insights that I hope to share. So, very cool. Got a comment here. Multimedia will include all kinds of different stuff, samples of written and spoken poetry. That's me. And the comment is, this list sounds as if you will be showing people how to go for it with their creativity, even if some things are, as you put it, half-baked. I like that idea. I do too. It removes so much stress of having to be perfect all the time and waiting for that moment, which never comes. So thank you. Glad to hear that. This is a comment on, every once in a while, Rennie Future might interrupt Rennie Present, blah, blah, blah. And the comment is, I like this idea of playing with time to make the discussion more immediate to the reader. Glad to hear that. Me too. Yep, some comments about the codes for going through time. There's like a scoreboard of sorts. I'm calling it a time navigator now. And it's a lot more clean to help you know when in time you are. Next comment about the background colors being confusing as it relates to that time navigator. That's been fixed. Yeah, it's an image now. Before, there was a huge problem with using headers because in an ebook, and I know there's multiple formats that we're doing this in, but the ebook format does not have any understanding, for the most part, of headers and footers. And so I couldn't rely on that, and that's why I was using all these background colors and garbage that only works in a Google Doc, but not in an ebook format, especially on a Kindle. So yeah, so that's been replaced with just an image that has a lot of creativity has gone into the image to make this a little bit easier to know where you're at. So bleep, the L is not in there. I'm sure it's just a typo. Actually, it wasn't a typo. I thought you spelled beep as in beep. I've always said beep, but I hear people saying bleep as well. So I changed that, but I've always been like beep, 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 beep whenever I'm imitating swear words. So there's comments about this phrase that I use. Not all of them, but a few didn't even want me to use their first names to identify them. And the comment goes, you might want to make sure that the stories you share are fiction, or as fiction, are not associated with a particular job in your timeline so that people cannot be identified even with a different name used. You may have already thought about this. Yeah, that's... It is a concern, and it has been thought of, and we're just rolling with it. See what happens. But yeah, and then this is a comment to my phrase, included in the breadcrumb trail I was describing, which now is called a time navigator, but the same concept. The breadcrumb trail I was describing earlier are all my grades and all my salaries up front. You got my academic and my professional transcript in there, I think is the phrase I used. And the comment I got for this is brave, Rennie, or stupid. This is brave, Rennie. Many people would not share that information publicly, or at least not all of it. Yeah. My dad, if he was dead, he'd be rolling in his grave right now. I don't want to, that was a bad idea. I don't want to jinx that. No. He's rolling around right now, if you were to hear that. The interactive album will be a completely different and very immersive experience altogether, is what I say. And the comment goes, this interactive album sounds very interesting and creative and seems like something that will appeal to multisensory, thank you for that word, I'm using it, multisensory learners as opposed to those who learn and absorb best through text primarily. It is a great and distinctive idea. Thank you. I sure hope so. I'll leave it at that. There's a lot about that I am really excited about. Now we're on chapter 1, goals. And I say there's a lot of things I'm trying to call out in the launch chapter. Did I achieve and explain these clearly enough? And I got a comment that says, I think the season's roadmap probably could be explained more clearly. Agreed. Maybe a table to show abbreviations and what they correspond to. I'm assuming that in the ebook, you would have a link in the text that would take the reader to the website where they can sign up for the multimedia album if they want to purchase that. Yep, that is definitely not entirely available, but it's out there and is going to be remedied. Yeah, it's on the roadmap to do. And there's definitely a lot more clarity that's been spun into that area describing the season's roadmap. I'm not even calling it a season's roadmap. It's a series, just to use the same language that ebooks are using right now so that it's better understood. But there's a lot more explanation there. I ask, what do you think about the current Pioneer's Gift? And do you have additional or subtractional ideas? And the comment I got was, I think the Pioneer's Gift section could be more clear. For example, I totally did not pick up on the fact that there could be private Facebook group discussions when I was reading earlier. Consider a bulleted list. There's a lot that I was trying to decide what makes sense to even say, because that changes as the technology changes, as I get closer to having this available out there anyway. So I stripped all that language out. I just say that there's some Pioneer gifts. And if they chase the link to find out what those are, at that point, that will be an updated webpage on my site explaining all that. So it's better to just push off some of these decisions that are not necessary right now rather than bake them in and then have to change all that when you realize, oh no, that doesn't make sense. So yeah. And you were also thinking that I did not define who would qualify as being the pioneers. Do they have to purchase by a certain date? Thank you. Yeah, it didn't come across to you as you were reading this until I asked the question. So yeah, I have to figure that out. I've got some ideas, but not completely certain. Skipping over to chapter 1, the ebook talk. Yeah, I'm going to skip this. There is a comment here, but there's this is where this dives more into some of the things I need to change about the beta going forward with you guys, because I'm going to start hitting some issues where it's going to be very necessary for me to be able to have the images and other multimedia, at least the images, so that you can assess in line with the narrative whether I'm being clear or not. And this platform, I'm going to reach out to the guy too, but I don't think he's going to be able to make that in time. So I got to figure something out. I've got some ideas. I'll let you know on that. Skipping to chapter 2, stage 0, section 1, stigma. This one's got some comments I really, really liked. Some of them actually made me cry this morning. And part of me was kind of wishing I had recorded this while I was reading it so that, you could get the real me and I don't have to fake the tears right now. I'm gonna try to cry. No, I'm not. I'm not going to try to cry. It's so silly. Like, I actually worry sometimes about how much information I'm giving away with how vulnerable I can be. But, my business model kind of relies on about 100% vulnerability, so I can't get too hung up on TMI. That's kind of a contradiction in terms. So there wasn't a question about this one. This was just someone's comment about the overall chapter. It says, I wasn't confused, but I majored in computer science, so I know what data structures are and tree data structures are. If you have readers not familiar with programming, they might be confused. Perhaps at least mention the class name. Yep, thank you. The data structures got in there so they can Google it. Very cool. I know that innate intelligence has nothing to do with why you had these upsetting experiences. I am assuming the reasons will be clarified later in the chapter, perhaps. Makes me want to keep reading to find out. Yes, thank you for wanting to keep reading, and you will find out if you do. A comment also on the side here. It's in reference to chemistry that I struggled with big time. It says, okay, Rennie, I feel for you. College level chemistry, hated it, didn't want to spend 20 hours a day studying it to get the kind of grades I needed. Is why I did not become a veterinarian as I had originally planned. And that's why I went into Ohio State, actually, was to become originally a veterinarian. So yeah, maybe that's why I decided against it. It was also chemistry. Another comment about flashbacks. Flashbacks to my data structures class. Wow, and I feel for you. Not the easiest class. No. Super important, but definitely not the easiest. And the last comment on this is still in reference to that scene, which this made me laugh. I said, while I walked triumphantly up the aisle to turn in my final exam, won't go into more details than that, but you say, hey, at least you had some guts to do that. And though, again, I feel for you. Yeah, I don't know if guts is the word or just lack of intelligence. No, don't do that. Not lack of intelligence. We're past that. All right, we're on the chapter 2, goals. How close did I get with you to feeling like the sentiment was, damn, what the hell happens next? And I got a comment that says, I definitely wanted to find out why you had the experiences you described. So I do feel the section was effective. Thank you. All right, and so now part 2. This is just my quick thoughts. A lot of what you guys have suggested has uncovered a huge opportunity to turn this into a series. And I got to be careful when I say turn this into, because it sounds like that wasn't the plan before. You know how when you think of things, there's the conscious part and the subconscious part of your planning process? Okay. I'm assuming you know. In the back of my mind, this has always been a series. It just got brought further and further to the forefront to my conscious mind because of you guys putting in these comments and helping me see where this really was what I was doing all along. I'm going to be updating, actually I've already done a lot of the updating of the content. I'm going to be pushing out some new betas hopefully soon, definitely this week, but I don't know how I'm going to do that just yet. But a lot of it has to do with restructuring this stuff into a book 1 and a book 2. Total pages I had for all of this after I turned it into a 6x9 ended up being a little over 500 pages anyways. So, and there's so many stories, and they're stories that actually entertain me. So like, I feel like if I keep reading this as I'm going through it and making this better and more clean so you can understand things better, if it still entertains me, and I hate repeating things, like I'm really bad about doing things over and over again to get better because it's just not authentic. It always feels ugly. Like I don't like scripting videos for this reason. It feels terrible. It's not wrong. It's just my personality. I can't cope with that too well. I've gotten better, but I like things to be as spontaneous as possible. And so it just seemed like if this stuff is still exciting to me, then this must be good stuff. It doesn't mean it can't get better. Obviously, I'm reaching out to you guys for feedback, and you've uncovered a lot of holes. But I'm just excited that even after having divided it into books, I'm seeing that this is really making this a lot more digestible, and then also connects a lot better with the idea that there is a lot of lessons learned in between that can then be also summarized as a whole. So I'm looking at the last book in the series to cover all of these different books, but just from the perspective of what was learned looking back. And in between each of these books, for the interactive piece, so not the ebook, but the album, I'm calling it the album book instead of ebook, album book. Got to be careful because somebody ripped that off the internet. Have it. Hopefully you won't get to it before I will, whatever. But this is something that allows me to have a different ending for each one of those in-between books that covers some of those previous lessons learned, as well as invites people in for an interactive session, which I'm hoping to meet people online and talk about these things and then build the last book together this way. So pretty excited about that. That's pretty much the general gist of all the new stuff on my end. There isn't a lot that I want to share about that until I have things formalized that you guys can take a look at. But that's where my head's been going to, and a lot of work has been going towards that end because of all the feedback you guys have been throwing at me, and you've been helping me see where this all fits and why it should be fitting in that direction. So huge thank you once again. And I will ping you guys as soon as there are new things out there for you to take a look at as you have time. And I'll also give you some timelines as I figure those out as well. That's it, guys. Peace out.